I am such a child. My wife just bought me one of these little Ulanzi eye lights. Not sponsored. I am not sorry for any weird colour things that happen throughout the course of this video. Not even a little bit. So, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to address something that, when you do this kind of thing, you get questions all the time, but mostly the surrounding the settings you use or the gear you use. And settings not just as in individual picture settings, things like autofocus modes and metering and white balance and all that kind of business. So I figured I would just do a short video. Well, I say short, it might not be that short, but I'm going to do a video going through my setup for day and night street photography, and hopefully that will help you all to figure out what I'm doing, and maybe you can tweak your settings and get something closer to what you're after. Now, as you know, settings are not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Different camera brands and different approaches to shooting will all affect the outcome of your image. So take these as kind of like a ballpark thing, but not like the only way to do things. It's just like an idea of how I go about this stuff. So let's jump into the camera. But before we do that, you know how this goes by now. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that thumbs up button. It is the single most important thing you can do for the channel. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell because I'm doing 2 videos every single week. If you want the free presets, they're linked down below, as are the socials. And don't forget to use the hashtag DFFeatured over on Instagram to get your work shown here. Let's get into the camera. Alright, so just to clarify, I am a Sony user. We are going through the settings on the A6000, so if you have a different camera, this might not all be exactly the same, but like I said at the beginning, it's kind of a ballpark. It's going to give you an idea of what I do. So starting with the aspect ratio, 3:2 gives you the full sensor. You can put this in 16:9, but if you're shooting RAW, that can be reverted in post-production anyway. So I'm not sure if that's the case with the JPEGs. I haven't checked because I never shoot JPEG, but yeah. I always shoot 3:2 and RAW. So moving over to menu number 2, you can see I have single shooting set on the drive mode. When I'm shooting street, I generally shoot burst mode just to give me multiple options through any given scene, any given composition. So I like to shoot burst mode simply for that fact. Moving down, I don't really use the flash on camera. I have a speed light if I ever need the flash, so these are somewhat irrelevant to me. But right down at the bottom is something that's very relevant, and that's continuous AF. When I'm shooting street, I have 2 approaches with autofocus. One of them is AFS, or single shot, for slow moving or still subjects, and AFC, continuous, for anything that's moving a little bit more quickly. There's something that I want to track. This is directly tied to, on the next screen, the focus area. Now this is currently set to center, and that is, I use that, I would say, probably 75% of the time. Like I said in the previous video, I tend to focus and then recompose. So center focusing works perfectly for me. If I know where a subject is going to be, I will often use zone focusing or something like that. But yeah, generally for me it is center focusing, and then it's focus and recompose. Now the next thing, the AF Illuminator. Now this may seem like a small thing, but it is, I always turn it off, because as small and relatively inconspicuous as it may be, it could alert the potential subject of your presence, and you lose that moment. That's gone. So for me, I always turn it off, eliminate any potential distractions, and so it allows you to catch the pure moment rather than them seeing you and potentially changing what they're doing. Now moving down, AF drive speed and track duration are video, so pretty much irrelevant for this video. Exposure comp and exposure step, these are unique to any given situation, so I can't really give you any input regarding those because it literally changes every single time. Right, so this is where we get into the things that are a little bit more important, I think. My ISO is currently set to auto. Generally speaking, I will keep my ISO on this camera between 100 and 1600. 1600 is like the high-end cap for me. Looking at the files in post, 1600, they're usable. A little bit of noise reduction, a little bit of work, you can make a nice image. But beyond that, they start to fall apart quite quickly. So this is more relative to nighttime shooting, whereby your ISO is going to be used to its limit, essentially. So even with a 50mm 1.8 on the camera, I will often have my ISO on this at night between 800 and 1600. I very rarely go above that, and I usually keep my shutter speed down at about 1/60th of a second. And if it introduces a little bit of blur, I'm fine with that. I can live with that. If you want to freeze your subject, you're going to need to be going up to 1/250th of a second if it's a person, and then you have to really decide whether you're willing to take your ISO to 3200 or above on an APS-C sensor, even with a fast lens. So just bear that in mind. Now this next thing, metering, it's quite important to the look of the image you want to achieve. So I have it currently set to multi, and I use that if the light is nice and evenly balanced across the scene. If it comes to protecting the highlights or the shadows, I will switch that to spot metering and meter from either of those respective places. Now with white balance, I usually will set it to daylight if it's good light, and I want to keep the same look throughout a selection of images, or if I'm shooting in the same sort of area, I know the light is not going to change a vast amount. But again, because I shoot raw, this can be changed in post. So again, for myself, it's not such a big deal, but if you are someone who likes to shoot JPEG, you may want to make sure that you get this right in the camera. For night shooting, I will usually set it to a custom Kelvin number. So in this case, you scroll all the way down to that one there, and I have it set at 4000. And the reason I choose that is simply because the streetlights where I live are quite yellowy in their color, and it throws the white balance off and makes the images incredibly blue sometimes. So I set it at 4000, and that kind of gives you like a nice middle ground. Moving down to dynamic range optimizer or optimization or auto HDR, I never use it. I don't want the camera to do anything it doesn't have to do. So anything regarding the look of my images and such as that, I want to do in post. So this is always off. Along the same lines, creative style is set to standard. Obviously you have things like vivid and landscape and neutral and so on in there. Shooting raw, it makes no difference because this can be changed in post. So again, unless you're shooting JPEG, this is something that is somewhat irrelevant. Okay, moving over to menu number 5, long exposure noise reduction off. I don't let the camera do anything like that either. I will do it all in post. Smile, face detect. I usually have face detect on for street. Color space, sRGB. That is the standard across the internet and most of the things, so that is why I use that. You can convert it after the fact. You do have the option to choose Adobe RGB in camera, but again, it's one of those things that is a personal preference. So moving over to the, I don't know, cog menu, settings menu, whatever this is. Zebras I have on, and I have them set to 100. Now I know with this camera that you can comfortably recover a stop from the highlights. So if it's a tricky exposure and the zebras pop up, I dial the exposure back so the zebras are just showing. Then I know that I will always protect the highlights. These cameras, in my opinion at least, do a much better job at recovering shadow detail than they do highlights. So zebras are fantastic. They are a great help for tricky lighting conditions. Grid lines. Now this is just a compositional aid. I have it set to diagonal and square grid. It just gives you more reference points for composition. You can use the rule of thirds, you can use nothing at all, entirely up to you. It really doesn't make a vast amount of difference because I tend to crop. I have no problem with cropping, and that will fix any weird positioning within the frame after the fact. Alright, moving over to the next page, number 2. Peaking level is high, and I have it color set to yellow. I just prefer it to the red. The red I just found incredibly distracting. This I mainly only pay attention to when I'm shooting manual focus or manual lenses. It's useful, it's very useful, but it's not always super accurate, so just be aware of that. Oftentimes, if your eye is telling you something's off, the chances are it may be. So peaking's great, but don't rely on it too much. Right, skipping through to number 6. This is, in my opinion, the most important thing on these cameras. The function menu setup. Now on the back of the camera here, you see the FN button. You can assign this to give you quick access to 12 different settings. People love to complain about the Sony menu system, but with the function menu, you can set up the quick access menu with pretty much anything you would need for photography. So let's have a quick look at how I've set mine up. So if you go to the function menu setup, you have 2 tabs, and it's basically giving you the upper portion of that menu I just showed you and the lower portion, and you can set these up to do pretty much whatever you want. So I have my first one set for the drive mode, which is single shot, burst mode, etc, etc. The flash modes were there by default, I just never changed them. Focus mode speaks for itself. You can switch between manual focus and such as that quite easily. Focus area, same deal. I can switch between center focus, wide, zone focusing, anything like that. Exposure compensation, exactly the same. Moving over to page number 2, I've got my ISO set up. Metering mode, white balance, aspect ratios, creative style. Again, this is only really relevant for JPEG shooting, and the quality, which gives you the option to shoot or to change between RAW and JPEG or both. Alright, so finally the last one, which I think is important, one I use quite a bit because I use manual lenses, is the custom key settings. Now I also use back button focus, so I have my AEL button set to AF on, and I have my custom button one, which is on the top here near the shutter button. I have that set to the focus magnifier, so that allows me to really dial in the focus when using manual lenses. Everything else is left as it was out of the box. I've never touched them. Those are the only two elements I use, but you can change them to whatever you want. You knew this was coming. I'm not sorry, not even a little bit. Yes, this is where we're at. Yes. Alright, that's enough of that business. If you have any further questions regarding the settings, please drop me a comment and let me know. If you want this Ulanzi eye light, there will be an affiliate link down below. If you use the affiliate links, I do get a little bit from it, but at no extra cost to you. And you guys have already been using them, so thank you very much. It all helps on my mission to becoming a full-time YouTube monkey. So, yeah, I'll see you in the next one.